Well, welcome to WFAD broadcast. Today we're going to talk to Frans Koopmans, who is a policy expert of the mental health organization, De Hoop, in the Netherlands. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Petterson.
We just received information from the Netherlands about things that might happen to the coffee shops, that the coffee shops might be closed to foreigners in the near future, or at least in the future. What are your comments to that?
Yeah, well, it forms a part of a whole new direction that our present government is taking towards coffee shops, and they built forth, you might say, on that what the previous government already had as an intention, that coffee shops should become smaller and more controllable, and should only focus on what they say the local market. In order to achieve that, their intention is that coffee shops should be made into closed clubs that only will serve the local market. And when you only serve the local market, it means that it will not be open to foreigners. It will also only be open to those who are having, who are at least 18 years or older, and who can show a identity card in order to prove that they are a legal citizen of the Netherlands. When that will proceed, that will mean that those who come to the Netherlands to visit a coffee shop, that they will not have the possibility to enter a coffee shop because they are not citizens of the Netherlands. So yes, that's quite a change, you might say, from what we have been doing all over the last 3 decades. But that all has to do with the fact that the Netherlands have experienced quite some public nuisance because of the fact that all the coffee shops were open to foreigners. And then you should think about, of course, Amsterdam, but also in the southern part of the Netherlands, that we have a great influx of people from Germany, from France, from Belgium, coming to the Netherlands to buy their coffee shops. When the rule that coffee shops will only be allowed for the local market and only in the form of a closed club, it will mean that those who are from abroad will not be able to enter the coffee shops. I must add to that at this moment the government is waiting for a decision of the highest court, a case in which that has been between the city of Maastricht and a coffee shop owner about precisely this, that a coffee shop is only a facility that is allowed to sell cannabis to its own citizens. But if we would base our expectation on what the European Court of Justice has said in December, then you might expect that indeed the government can proceed with the rule that the coffee shops will only be open for its own citizens and only for those who are members of the club.
So how many coffee shops do you have right now in the Netherlands, roughly? Do you know that?
Well, at this moment we have about 600 coffee shops in the Netherlands. That's still quite a lot, but if you compare that with what we had in the beginning of the 90s, we had perhaps even 1,500 to 2,000 coffee shops. So already over the last couple of years we have seen a gradual decrease in the number of coffee shops, and those who are still existing have to comply with very strong regulation criteria. And also those criteria are being strengthened, you might say. We have always had a couple of criteria in which was stipulated that you are not allowed to sell cannabis to youngsters below the age of 18. You are not allowed to make editorials. You are not allowed to sell hard drugs, and you may not allow a public nuisance in your coffee shop or in the neighborhood of your coffee shop. You are not allowed to have great quantities in your coffee shop. But the present government also has the intention to broaden the distance between the coffee shops and schools. At this moment, that is 250 meters, and they want to make that into 350 meters. Okay, that's not a very big distance. Still, if it would be applied, that will mean that a lot of coffee shops will have to close down. Also, there can be rules about, and that can be done at the local level between, let's say, the local mayor, the local public prosecutor, about specific controls or other kinds of condoning requirements. So the coffee shops are not very glad at this moment with the present government.
I can imagine. What about the common people, ordinary people? Would they support this kind of measure, or what do they say? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, in general, I would say that the atmosphere in the Netherlands is more at this moment into a law and order. In the law and order line. So I guess that they will not object to more strong regulations for coffee shops. Still, on the other hand, you have to realize that as long as you are not bothered by coffee shops, you really have no opinion. The Netherlands is really a country that as long as it is outside of your own circle, you don't bother about it. Only when it is happening in your own facility, then you have an opinion about it. But I would say, in general, I think this line of approach will be applauded in the Netherlands.
Now, you mentioned that for over 3 decades you've had a very large number of coffee shops, between maybe 1,500 and 2,000. How come it has decreased to such an extent that today there are roughly about 600? Is that voluntary closure, or is it public pressure, or changing of rules, or what?
Well, I think that you will have to go back into let's say, the beginning of the 90s, when we had that great number of coffee shops, and people started to realize that things were getting out of hand, that the commercialization of the selling of cannabis was becoming very dangerous, and the heavy criminals were gaining a foothold in the Dutch society. That was when the government decided that when you wanted to have a coffee shop, you would have to comply with specific regulation criteria. For example, at that time, it was also possible for a coffee shop to sell alcohol. Well, it was stipulated by the government that you had to choose: either you are a coffee shop and then you sell cannabis and perhaps a cup of coffee, but you're not allowed to sell alcohol, or you become a pub, but then you are not allowed to sell cannabis. So that made a big difference. Or let's say facilities, outlets had to choose what they wanted. That's one. But also in the, let's say, from the mid-90s onwards, the government has become much tougher, and that has been going on up till today. And that has to do with the fact that, well, we are having a lot of problems with coffee shops, or at least we had them, and we have found out that cannabis is not such a healthy substance as people often said it was. The Netherlands have been very reluctant in admitting that cannabis is a dangerous substance. But research after research proves that cannabis is a substance that can prove to be very dangerous, also in the sense that it can cause psychosis, etc. And I think that has caused the atmosphere and the opinion in the Netherlands to change and say that, well, listen, we should not be too naive in thinking that it is a substance that you can use without any risk.
Now, you are working at the Hope, which is a very big organization. Have you experienced patients or clients or guests that have obvious problems with cannabis?
Yes. Yeah, and we have had them all over the years that we exist. We exist since 1975, and certainly the last 10 years, we have seen quite an increase in the number of clients coming to us with a cannabis problem, with really a cannabis addiction. And that is still the case. The latest numbers in the Netherlands still indicate that even though the use of cannabis seems to have stabilized, those who come to the helping agencies for cannabis problems has increased tremendously. And it's what we also experience here at The Hope, that the number of cannabis clients is increasing.
And do they apply voluntarily, or how do they come to you?
Yeah. They apply voluntarily, and they have experienced that their use of cannabis has gotten out of hands and has taken a much more prominent place in their lives than they that they intended it to be. And they have found out that it really hurts their lives. It hurts their health. It hurts their social contacts. It hurts their work. It hurts their ability to learn. So in a lot of respects, they find out that it is having a very negative influence on their lives. And I think, I'm unhappy with the fact that it has taken so long for the Dutch people to realize that. I mean, we have been saying that all over the years, but only in the last 10, 15 years, that has become more or less the common position in the Netherlands that, cannabis is something that you need to be very careful of.
So what age groups are we talking about when you mention that it has been quite a substantial increase at your organization? What age groups are we talking about?
Well, you're talking about all age groups, even also from young people onwards. We have a specific center here at The Hope that is focused on young addicts, and most of them have cannabis problems. They have come to us because of the fact that they have started to use soft drugs, as we call them, but they have found out in their lives that those drugs were not that soft, and that in combination with all other kinds of choices that they have made, it has led their life to become to deteriorate, and they have to go to a helping agency in order to get their life back in order.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning here that the coffee shop owners obviously are not very happy about this. So what do they intend to do? What do they do to try to reverse a possible decision?
Well, I don't know what they really will be doing. At this moment, most of the coffee shops, I think, try to comply with the regulations as far as possible. And of course, they can go and see their friends in specific political parties in the Netherlands that are much more liberal towards the drug problem, and try to see if they might be able to change the tide. But the present government has the majority, and this present government has really the intention of not liberalizing, but instead restrict the possibility of coffee shops. I have to add to that, by the way, that there has been the initiative that when a coffee shop would become a closed club with a membership, that coffee shop could be able to have its own influx of cannabis by way of a local dealer, or at least a local supplier of cannabis. And as far as I've been able to read in the letter, also that position is not being supported by the government. So, in general, you have to say that it will be a tough time for coffee shops.
When could we expect a message then from the highest court in your country?
The 1st of July. So in 1 month's time, we will know if the highest court is in agreement with the citizen regulation that only Dutch citizens are allowed to be a member of a coffee shop club. And if that does not happen, well, then we will still have to see what will come of that. But that it will become more restricted, I think that is clear.
Finally, there are cities in the Netherlands who, through the mayor and prosecutor and police chiefs, I suppose, have decided to close their coffee shops. I'm thinking about Roosendaal and Bergen op Zoom as an example.
Yeah, that's right.
Has that been followed by other cities as well, or discussions in other cities?
No. I have not seen or read about any other local communities that have decided to really close down all the coffee shops. But in the case of Roosendaal and Bergen-op-Zoom, they were cities who were really having a lot of problems, especially with the drug tourists. And you might expect that if the citizen criterion will be applied for a lot of cities, that will mean that that public nuisance will diminish. At least that is what the expectation of the government, and I think they are right in expecting that it will diminish. Well, we will just see.
Yeah. Well, we will wait and see. We thank Frans Koopmans for having talked to us, and I would suppose that we will get back to you after the 1st of July to find out the decision from the High Court in the Netherlands. Thank you very much, Frans.